Thank you very much. It's good to be here. Grateful to be able to speak and to talk on this topic, which is particularly close to my own heart, and not just in a theoretical way, but in an actual practical way as well. So as Neil says, my name is David Dickson. I'm a pastor from a small church in Dundee, in Lochee, and particularly have a heart for seeing strong families. And that means that families are together. That means that they're educating together, they're socializing together, they're working together. And in so doing, we are then the foundation of a society that is strong and that is taking responsibility where God has called us to take responsibility. So I'm a pastor. My dad was also a Baptist pastor, and I remember particularly a helpful illustration that he used to say, and I remember even to this day, where he would talk about the reality of a washing machine. When you look at a washing machine and you see the reality of the drum that spins around, it can take water and it can mix things. There are also something else that does that, and that is a cement mixer. You can look at the two and you can see very similar identities between them. But if I tried to make concrete in my washing machine, not only would Kath be annoyed, but it wouldn't work very well. I would be in trouble because the machine is simply not designed for it. It could perhaps make a single batch of concrete, but after that, it would be ruined for everything else. I know it's designed for that because I've consulted the designer. I know the makers of the machine. I'm going to get the greatest blessing out of that machine if I use it according to its design. Now, even more than that, when we think about machines, when we think about design and ideas, we often also think about the case of rights. What right do we have to use such things? Often when things are designed, we don't have full rights to use them. If I tried to sell my own copy of the iPhone, I would soon discover the wrath of Apple and its legal team coming down on my head. We know this about the things that we make personally. We understand this idea of ownership and responsibility in the things that come according to mankind's invention. But when it comes to the family, when it comes to God's world, we often miss this idea. Who owns them? Who has designed them? Whose right do they get to decide what happens to them? Well, just like with the washing machine, just like with the smartphone, it is the creator, it is the owner of these things who has the right to decide how and where they should be used. We do not own our life, and therefore we do not get to define the categories of men and women and children and family and church and even state. We do not therefore have the right not only to do things to them, but to redefine them. Okay? To do so would to go against the design, like my washing machine. It would no longer wash, it would get clogged, it would stop working. The job of the state and the church and the family is not to define things, but rather to live out the design, to live out the design for which they have been created. Now, I wonder if you've ever stopped and thought about the reality of why we call our leaders ministers. Why do we call our religious leaders ministers? Because their job is to administer according to a predefined plan. My job as a pastor is not to invent doctrine. My job is to teach what God has already given to us. And so it is our civil leaders' job not to legislate new law, but to judge justly according to God's plan, according to the plan that He has already put in place. They too are ministers. It is in the name. So the main problem here is when we as finite creatures believe that we can know everything there is to know. Not even just individually, but corporately. Therefore, we go down the road thinking that we know what the consequences are going to be of the actions that we are taking now, even if it's done in good faith. There was a time in this country when we thought slavery was a good idea, when we thought it was common sense, when some people we thought were lower down the evolutionary scale than others. Yet that was an evil idea. But yet it was a commonly held view. It was even enshrined in law. We, in our arrogance, decided that we knew best and we legislated for it. And yet, if we had gone rightly to God's word in the Bible, we would have found that there was a serious sentence against it. The point is this: we have no right in this country to legislate against laws that promote things that are not in God's word. And it is a good thing when they disappear out of our law. And this should be a warning for us that we can easily fall into the same trap if we are not careful. Believing something to be common sense, believing it to be perhaps an obvious solution to a problem that we have. But it is the height of arrogance when we believe to know enough, that we believe to think we are knowledgeable enough to be able to legislate for ourselves. Where we can think that we can look into the future and know all the consequences of the actions that we currently take. So we need to be careful to think about what God has laid down in regards to marriage and family, the state, and education. The God of the Bible, the one true God, Jesus Christ, is not silent on these issues. He's not left us in the dark to feel our way, but he has actually spoken. He has defined things for us, and he has legislated already for us. Our job is to administer the law that he has already given to us. The right place for raising children is in a lawful marriage between one man and one woman for life. Children need both a mum and a dad. And yet these children are not ultimately ours, but they are a gift. They are eternal souls who will live forever and who we will give and stand before God one day and tell him and give an account for what we have done. So who has been given direct responsibility to raise these children? Well, it is their father and their mother. And God does not make mistakes. He gives certain children to certain parents. And he calls those parents to raise those certain children. That was the design. That is how it works best. Does that mean it is the most efficient way to raise children? Actually, it isn't. It's not the most efficient way. But it is the best way. The most joyous, the most blessed. It takes wisdom to understand the difference. It is no doubt more efficient to eat a beautiful Sunday roast by zapping it in a blender and drinking it. But is that the best way to do it? No. It's not the most joyous way to eat it either. Of course it isn't. God is not a killjoy. In fact, it is the exact opposite. He invites us into the beauty of the design that he has given to us, to take it and to savor it, to see God's glory in it, and to understand the purpose of why he directs us in such a way. That is where we find true happiness, true joy, and ultimately our peace. And so therefore we need to have a sober warning to consider when we go contrary to God's design. When we believe that we can arrogantly know best and even lead astray our precious children that God has given to us. Jesus does not hold back on the warning that he gives to those who lead away and astray children from him into sin. He says it will be better for them to have a millstone fastened around their neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. So let us take this afternoon the sober warning and to trust in God's design for us. Thank you.